$200. The words fell from his mouth before his mind caught up. Every head turned. Clara Mae Jenkins stood on that auction block, 300 pounds of shame and silence, while her own father counted the money she'd fetch like livestock. She'd stopped crying an hour ago, stopped hoping 2 years ago, stopped believing she deserved anything but this the day her mother died. But a 5-year-old girl was tugging at a mountain man's sleeve, whispering words that would change everything.
"Papa, that's her. That's the angel from my dreams."
If you want to see how one child's impossible faith saves 3 broken souls, stay until the end. Subscribe to our channel and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The town of Copper Creek had seen its share of ugliness over the years, but what happened on that October afternoon in 1874 would be whispered about for decades, though never for the reasons folks expected. Clara Mae Jenkins stood on the makeshift platform in the town square, her hands twisting together at her waist. She was 28 years old, 5'8", and weighed somewhere north of 220 pounds. The kind of woman people noticed, and then looked away from, embarrassed, like they'd seen something they shouldn't have. Her dress was faded calico, let out at the seams so many times the fabric had given up trying to hold its shape. It hung on her body like an apology, like she was apologizing for taking up space. "What am I bid for this fine specimen?" Jasper Carver's voice dripped with sarcasm that drew cruel laughter from the crowd. He ran the general store and fancied himself important. Today, he wore his Sunday suit and a smile that made Clara's stomach turn. "Strong back on this one, gentlemen."
Good for heavy work. Might not be much to look at. More laughter, louder this time.
But she'll earn her keep. I guarantee it. Clara kept her eyes fixed on a point beyond the crowd, beyond the mountains, beyond everything. She'd learned years ago how to leave her body behind when things got unbearable, how to float somewhere safe inside her head, while the world did its worst to her flesh. "Come now, someone must want her." Carver's voice turned wheedling. "Her daddy's put her up fair and square to settle his debts. Legal and binding. Big girl like her, she can do the work of 2 normal women. That's value, gentlemen." Near the back of the platform, Silas Jenkins slouched against a post, picking his teeth with a splinter. He was rail-thin and red-faced, his skin carrying the permanent flush of a man who'd made whiskey his only friend. He watched the proceedings with the detached interest of someone selling off unwanted furniture. He was Clara's father, and he hadn't looked at her once. $10, someone called out. A ranch hand, young and stupid, egged on by his laughing friends. $10? Carver pounced on it. For a woman this size? Why, the food she eats is worth more than that. The crowd roared. Clara felt the words land like blows, but her face didn't change. Couldn't change. If she let them see they'd hurt her, it would only get worse. That was a lesson she'd learned at 5 years old, standing at her mother's grave while her father told her it was her fault. If you'd been a boy, your mama wouldn't have had to try again. Wouldn't have died pushing out that stillborn brother of yours. 23 years of being told she was worthless. 23 years of being too big, too plain, too much. And now this, standing on a platform while men bid on her like cattle. $15, another voice called. 15.
That's more like it, Carver grinned.
Do I hear 20? 20, the ranch hand again. His friends were practically crying with laughter. $20 for the fat one. Billy's gonna need a bigger bed. Clara's hands tightened until her knuckles went white. But she didn't move, didn't speak. What was there to say? They were right about her. Everyone was right about her. She was exactly what they said she was. Worthless. Unmarriageable. a burden. Her father's words, repeated so often they'd become the only truth she knew. 20 going once. Carver's voice had lost some of its bluster. The joke was wearing thin even for him. 20 going twice. Clara closed her eyes. She'd made her peace with whatever came next. If the man who bought her was cruel enough, maybe it would end quickly. Maybe she wouldn't have to keep fighting to survive in a world that had made it abundantly clear she didn't belong.
Papa?
The voice was small. So small, it shouldn't have cut through the murmuring crowd. But it did. Everyone turned. At the edge of the square, half hidden behind a water trough, stood a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Blonde hair caught the afternoon light like spun gold. Her dress was simple. Her boots were scuffed, and her face held an expression far too serious for such a young thing.
Papa, look!
She was tugging at the sleeve of the man beside her. And that man, Clara felt her breath catch. He was tall, taller than most men she'd ever seen, and built like he'd been carved from the mountains themselves. Broad shoulders, raw-boned, dressed in buckskin and homespun that marked him as someone who lived outside civilization. A thick black beard couldn't hide the hard planes of his face. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and deep and holding something that looked almost like pain. He wore a knife on his belt and carried himself with the stillness of something wild that had wandered too close to human habitation and wasn't sure yet whether to stay or bolt.
Papa?
The little girl's voice grew more insistent.
That's her. That's the lady from my dreams.
Clara saw the man, Elijah Brennan, some distant part of her mind supplied. The mountain man who came down twice a year to trade furs, go very still. Hush now, Rosie.
But Papa...
I said hush. But the child wouldn't hush. She pointed directly at Clara, her small arms steady and certain.
I dreamed about her, Papa. 3 nights. She was crying and all alone, and nobody would help her. And I told her we'd come find her. I promised.
The crowd had gone quiet. Curious now. This was better entertainment than the auction itself. Clara felt exposed in a new way. Seen. And somehow that was worse than being mocked, because this child was looking at her like she was something precious. And Clara knew she wasn't. Knew she was exactly what everyone said. Big. Ugly. Worthless. Rosie. Elijah Brennan's voice was rough. Unused.
That's not... We can't... We have to help her, Papa.
The little girl's eyes were filling with tears.
I promised. In the dream, I promised her. If we don't help her, she'll...
She couldn't finish, but something in that unfinished sentence made Elijah Brennan look up. His eyes met Clara's, and for 1 heartbeat, 2, 3, neither of them breathed. Clara saw recognition in those storm-gray eyes. Not of her specifically, but of something else. Something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Pain. Isolation. The bone-deep exhaustion of surviving in a world that had taken everything. 20 going twice, Carver's voice cracked through the moment like a whip. Last chance, gentlemen. After this, she goes to Billy here, and God help them both. Laughter. Always laughter. $200. The words came from Elijah Brennan. They fell into the crowd like stones into still water. Silence. Total. Absolute silence. Clara stared at him. Carver's mouth hung open. The ranch hand who'd bid $20 looked like he'd been slapped. Even Silas Jenkins straightened up from his slouch, sudden interest lighting his bloodshot eyes. 2... Carver swallowed. 200, sir? You deaf? Elijah stepped forward, Rosie's hand still clasped in his. The crowd parted without anyone deciding to move. 200, cash. That cover the debts? He was looking at Silas now, Clara's father, the man who'd spent 23 years making her feel like a mistake. More than cover 'em. Silas pushed off from the post, moving faster than Clara had seen him move in years. More than cover him by far. She's yours, mister. Fair and square. I don't want her. Elijah's voice was flat. I want her debts paid. I want papers saying you've got no claim on her no more. Legal and binding. Silas blinked. Now, see here. You heard me. Elijah's hand went to his belt. Not the knife. A leather pouch that clinked with the weight of real money. $200. You sign papers saying your daughter's free and clear of any obligation to you, any claim, any hold. Then you take this money and you never come near her again.
That's not, Carver started. That's between me and him.
Elijah didn't even look at the storekeeper. His eyes were locked on Silas. What do you say, old man? $200 to never see your daughter again. Seems like a good deal for both of us. Clara couldn't breathe. This wasn't how auctions worked. This wasn't how anything worked. Men didn't pay $200, 2 years' worth of honest wages, to set a woman free. They paid to own, to use, to... Papa! Rosie tugged at Elijah's hand again. Tell her it's okay. She's scared. And those words, those simple, impossible words from a child who saw things no one else could see, broke something in Clara's careful control. A tear slipped down her cheek. Just one. But it was the first tear she'd let fall in public since she was 5 years old. Deal. Silas's voice was eager now, greedy. Deal, mister. Whatever papers you want, I'll sign 'em. Just show me that money. Elijah moved to the platform. Clara watched him come, unable to make her legs work, her mind still trying to understand what was happening. He stopped at the platform's edge and looked up at her. Close up, his eyes were even more gray, even more tired. He had a scar on his forehead, small and white, and his hands were calloused from hard labor. He smelled like pine and wood smoke, and something else, something lonely. You want to come down from there? His voice was gentler than she'd expected, still rough, still unused to speaking, but gentle underneath. I don't... Clara's voice cracked. She tried again. I don't understand. Ain't much to understand. He held out his hand. You want to stay up there, or you want to come down? But why? Papa says you're coming home with us. Rosie appeared at the platform's edge, her small face beaming. I told him you would. I told him you needed us. And we need you too. I dreamed it. Clara looked at the child, at her bright eyes, her absolute certainty. I'm not, she swallowed hard. I'm not an angel. I'm not whatever you dreamed. I'm just... You're Clara. Rosie said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. That's what you told me, in the dream. You said your name was Clara, and you were so tired of being sad. The tears came faster now. Clara couldn't stop them. Please, come down. Rosie's voice wobbled. Please, I've been waiting so long to find you. Clara took Elijah's hand. His grip was strong and warm and calloused, and when she stepped down from that platform, she stumbled. Her legs had gone numb from standing so long, and he caught her. Just caught her, steadied her, then stepped back and let her stand on her own. Thank you. The words came out barely a whisper. Elijah nodded once, then turned away to deal with the paperwork. Rosie slipped her small hand into Clara's. Her fingers were cold from the October air, but her grip was fierce. It's okay now, the child said softly. You don't have to be scared anymore. Papa won't let anything bad happen, and neither will I. Clara looked down at this strange, certain child who spoke of dreams and angels and finding people who needed help. Why? She asked.
Why would you, your father, why would anyone?
Rosie's smile was gentle, patient. The smile of someone explaining something obvious to someone who just couldn't see. Because you're supposed to be with us. I knew it the first night I dreamed you. You're supposed to be our family. The papers took an hour to draw up. Clara stood at the edge of the crowd, no longer on display, but still watched, while Elijah dictated terms to Carver and Silas signed document after document. Legal language about debt satisfaction and relinquishment of claim and transfer of responsibility. Clara didn't understand half of it, but she understood the moment when Silas pocketed his $200 and walked away without looking at her, without a word of goodbye, without anything at all to acknowledge that he was abandoning the daughter he'd raised for 28 years. Not that he'd ever really raised her. More like, kept me alive just enough to be useful. Just enough to cook and clean and tend the animals. Just enough to sell when he ran out of other things to sell. "You all right?" Elijah's voice startled her. He'd finished with the paperwork and now stood beside her, Rosie clinging to his leg. "I don't know," Clara admitted. It was the most honest thing she'd said in years. "I don't know what I am." "Fair enough." He looked out at the crowd, which was dispersing now that the show was over. "We should move. Long ride back to the cabin. Don't want to be on the trail after dark." "Back to—" Clara stopped. "Your cabin? Unless you've got somewhere else to go." She didn't. He knew she didn't. Everyone knew she didn't. "What do you want from me?" The question burst out before she could stop it. The question that had been burning in her chest since the moment he spoke those two impossible words. $200. "What do you expect me to— What am I supposed to— Right now?" Elijah cut her off, but not unkindly. "Right now, I expect you to get on a horse and ride back to my cabin where it's warm. Tomorrow, we figure out the rest." "But—" "She asks a lot of questions, Papa." Rosie grinned up at Clara. "That's okay. I ask a lot of questions too. Papa says it's good to be curious." Clara looked between them. The mountain man with the storm cloud eyes. The little girl who spoke of dreams and angels. "I have nothing. No money, no clothes except what I'm wearing. No skills worth anything. I can cook and clean, but so can any woman, and I'm—" She gestured at herself, at her body, at the size of her that had been mocked and derided and held up as proof of her worthlessness for as long as she could remember. "I'm not what you think I am," she finished miserably. "I'm not worth $200. I'm not worth anything." Elijah was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My wife died 4 years ago. Childbirth. I couldn't get her to a doctor in time. Rosie was 1 year old. Doesn't remember her mama. Barely talked for 3 years after Emmy passed. Then 3 nights ago, she woke up crying, saying she dreamed about a woman who needed help. Begged me to come to town. Said we had to find her. He met Clara's eyes. I don't know why I did what I did back there. Don't know why I couldn't walk away. But Rosie hasn't smiled like this in years. Hasn't talked this much in longer. And I learned a long time ago that sometimes the things we don't understand are the things worth paying attention to." Clara stared at him. "So here's what I know," he continued. "I know you needed help. I know my daughter thinks you're something special. And I know I've got a cabin up in the mountains with plenty of room and plenty of work, and nobody to do it but me and a 5-year-old. He paused. "I'm not asking you for anything, Clara. I'm offering you a place to stay, a place to figure out what comes next. That's all." "That's all?" "That's all." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. But 28 years of experience screamed that this was a trap. That kindness always came with a price. That men who paid $200 for women expected something in return. something Clara had never given anyone. Something she'd been told she was too ugly and too fat to ever be asked for anyway.
"You don't know me," she said quietly. "You don't know what people say about me, what I am."
I know what I saw up there. Elijah's voice was steady. I saw a woman being sold by her own father. I saw a crowd laughing at her because she was bigger than they thought she should be. I saw people treating a human being like livestock. His jaw tightened. And I saw you standing there, taking it. Not crying, not begging, just standing there, surviving it. The way you've probably survived everything else in your life. Clara's throat closed. "That's not weakness," Elijah said. "That's strength. And anyone who told you different was lying."
"Papa,"
Rosie tugged at his sleeve.
"she's crying."
Clara hadn't realized she was.
"It's okay."
Rosie let go of Elijah and wrapped her small arms around Clara's waist, or as much of it as she could reach.
"Papa made me cry too, when he first started being nice to me after Mama died.
It's confusing when people are nice after nobody's been nice for a long time." The child's words, so simple, so devastating, broke something in Clara. She knelt down, bringing herself eye level with Rosie, and pulled the little girl into a real embrace. The kind of embrace she hadn't given or received since her mother died 23 years ago.
"Thank you,"
she whispered into that golden hair.
"Thank you for finding me."
"I promised I would." Rosie's voice was muffled against Clara's shoulder. "I always keep my promises." Above them, Elijah Brennan stood watch. His face was unreadable, but something in his storm-gray eyes had softened. "We should go," he said finally. "Sun's getting low." Clara straightened up, Rosie's hand still in hers.
"I'll come with you," she said. I don't know if I can be what you need, what she needs, but I'll try."
That's all anyone can do.
Elijah turned toward where his horse and pack mule waited. "Try." They rode out of Copper Creek as the sun painted the sky orange and gold. Clara sat behind Rosie on the big bay horse, her arms wrapped around the child's small body. Elijah rode in front, leading the pack mule, his broad back blocking the wind. The town fell away behind them. The whispers and laughter fell away. The auction block, the crowd, her father's indifferent face. All of it fell away. And ahead, the mountains rose up like guardians, like promises, like the first pages of a story that hadn't been written yet. Clara didn't know what waited for her in that cabin. Didn't know if she could trust this silent mountain man or his impossible daughter. Didn't know if she was riding toward salvation or just a different kind of hell. But as Rosie leaned back against her, warm and trusting, and began to hum a little song about angels and answered prayers, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not hope. Not yet. She'd been burned too many times to call it that. But something close. Something small and stubborn and refusing to die, even after everything. "Maybe," it whispered. "Maybe this time." Behind them, the town of Copper Creek went back to its ordinary cruelty. And ahead, the mountains waited. Patient, eternal. Ready to shelter 3 broken souls who didn't yet know they were already becoming whole. They rode for hours. The trail grew steeper, the air grew thinner, and the silence between them stretched like something living. Clara held on to Rosie, feeling the child's warmth against her chest, and tried not to think about what she was doing. She was riding into the mountains with a stranger, a man who'd paid $200 for her, a man she knew nothing about except that he'd lost his wife and his daughter, dreamed of angels. This is madness. But madness was better than the alternative. Madness was better than standing on that auction block while Billy the ranch hand counted out his $20, and the crowd laughed about needing a bigger bed. Rosie had fallen asleep about an hour into the ride. Her small body had gone limp against Clara's chest, trusting completely. It was that trust that undid Clara more than anything else. This child didn't know her, had no reason to believe Clara was safe or good or worthy of being held. But she slept anyway, like Clara was already family. "You doing all right back there?" Elijah's voice startled her. He'd barely spoken since they left town.
Yes,
Clara's voice came out rough.
fine.
"Liar." She stiffened. Elijah glanced back over his shoulder. His face was half shadowed in the fading light, but she could see the ghost of something that might have been understanding. "You're holding yourself like you expect the horse to throw you, like you're waiting for something bad to happen." He turned back to the trail. "Can't blame you for that, but it won't. Not tonight." Clara didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. They rode on. The sun had fully set by the time they rounded a final bend, and Clara saw it. A cabin nestled in a small valley between two peaks. Smoke curled from the chimney. A barn stood nearby, and beyond it she could hear the faint sound of water running. It looked like something from a dream.
Home,
Rosie murmured sleepily, stirring against Clara's chest.
we're home, Papa.
"We're home, Sprite." Elijah dismounted and reached up to lift Rosie down. The child immediately wrapped herself around his neck, still half asleep. Then he turned to Clara. "Need help?" She shook her head and climbed down herself, her legs screaming protest after hours in the saddle. She stumbled when her feet hit the ground. Her body was heavier than the horse was used to, heavier than she wanted to be. But she caught herself on the saddle and stayed upright. Elijah watched, but didn't comment. Didn't make a joke about her weight. Didn't look at her with that familiar mixture of disgust and pity she'd grown so accustomed to. He just waited until she was steady, then nodded toward the cabin. "Go on inside. Fire's banked, but there's still heat. I'll see to the animals." Clara hesitated.
I can help. I know how to tend horses.
"I know you can." Elijah shifted Rosie's weight in his arms. "But you've been standing on that platform for hours. You're exhausted. And you're shaking." Clara looked down at her hands. He was right. She was shaking. Had been since they left town, probably. She just hadn't noticed. "Go inside," Elijah repeated. "There's bread in the box by the fire. Eat something. Rest. We'll sort the rest tomorrow." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to prove she was useful, that she could earn her keep, that she wasn't just a burden taking up space. But her legs were trembling, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. And Rosie was already asleep again, against Elijah's shoulder.
Thank you,
she said quietly. Elijah nodded and turned toward the barn. Clara walked to the cabin door, pushed it open, and stepped inside. The warmth hit her first. After hours in the cold mountain air, the cabin felt like an embrace. A fire burned low in the stone fireplace. A rough table and chairs sat near the center. Shelves lined the walls, holding supplies and tools and what looked like dried herbs. It was simple. It was clean. It was the most welcoming space Clara had entered in years. She found the bread box where Elijah had said it would be and tore off a chunk, eating it standing up because she couldn't quite make herself sit down. It felt too much like presumption, too much like belonging. You don't belong here. You don't belong anywhere. Her father's voice. Always her father's voice. Clara closed her eyes and forced herself to breathe. He's gone. He sold you and walked away, and he's never going to hurt you again. But the voice didn't stop. Never stopped. Had been playing on repeat in her head for 23 years. Too big, too ugly, too much. No man will ever want you. You're worthless, girl. Worthless. You're still standing. Clara's eyes flew open. Elijah stood in the doorway, Rosie no longer in his arms. He must have put her to bed already. He was looking at Clara with an expression she couldn't read. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "No, you're not." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "But that's all right. Nobody's fine after a day like today." He moved past her to the fireplace and added another log, stoking the flames until they rose higher. "Rosie's in the loft. She'll sleep through till morning now." He straightened and turned to face her. "You can have the corner by the window tonight. I'll rig up something better tomorrow. Give you some privacy." Clara stared at him. "Where will you sleep?" "Loft with Rosie. Same as always." "But I can't take your—" "You're not taking anything." Elijah's voice was firm, but not unkind. "I'm offering. There's a difference." Clara felt her throat tighten. "Why are you doing this?" The question came out small, broken. Elijah was quiet for a long moment. "You asked me that already," he said finally. "On the ride here. Asked what I wanted from you." "You didn't really answer." "No." He moved to the table and sat down, gesturing for her to do the same. "I didn't." Clara hesitated, then sat across from him. The table between them felt like a barrier, like protection. "My wife, Emmy," Elijah began, his voice rough with disuse. "She was the kindest person I ever knew. Could find good in anyone, even me, and God knows I didn't make that easy." He stared at his hands. "When she died, I blamed myself. Still do, most days. I chose to live up here, away from doctors, away from help. I thought I could protect her from the world. Turns out I couldn't protect her from anything." Clara said nothing, just listened. "After she passed, I shut down. Stopped talking to people. Stopped caring about anything except keeping Rosie alive and staying away from town." He looked up. 4 years I've been up here. 4 years of nothing but silence and grief, and the little girl who barely spoke because her daddy was too broken to teach her how." "She seems to speak plenty now," Clara said quietly. Elijah's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Started 3 nights ago. Woke up talking about a woman she'd dreamed about. A woman who was sad and alone and needed help." He held Clara's gaze. "She described you, before she'd ever seen you, described you exactly." Clara felt cold despite the fire. "That's not possible." "Didn't say it was possible. Said it happened." Elijah leaned back in his chair. "Emmy used to say Rosie was special. Said some children see things others can't. I didn't believe her. Thought it was just a mother's pride." He paused. "But 3 nights of Rosie begging me to go to town. 3 nights of her describing a woman with brown hair and gray-blue eyes and hands that never stopped working. 3 nights of her crying because she'd promised to find this woman, and she couldn't keep her promise if I wouldn't take her." Clara's hands were shaking again. "So I brought her. Told myself it was just to ease her mind. We'd go to town, she'd see there was no woman from her dreams, and we'd come home." Elijah's voice dropped. "Then we walked past that square, and there I was." "And there you were," he nodded, "standing on that platform, looking exactly like she'd described. And Rosie grabbed my hand and said, 'That's her, Papa. That's the angel.'" Clara laughed. It came out harsh, bitter. "I'm not an angel. I'm the opposite of an angel. I'm exactly what everyone in that crowd said I was." "What did they say you were?" The question was soft, dangerous. Clara met his eyes. "Fat, ugly, worthless, unmarriageable. A burden no man would ever want." The words came out flat, practiced. "My father's been telling me that since I was 5 years old. Since my mother died giving birth to the son he wanted. and got me instead. Your father's a drunk and a fool. My father's right. Clara's voice cracked. Look at me. I'm nearly as tall as you and twice as wide as any decent woman should be. I take up too much space. I eat too much. I'm too much.
Too much for who? The question stopped her cold. What? Too much for who? Elijah leaned forward. For your father? A man who sold his own daughter like livestock? For those people in that crowd, laughing at someone else's pain to feel better about their own miserable lives? For Billy the ranch hand, who probably couldn't handle a real woman if one fell in his lap? Clara couldn't breathe. You want to know what I saw on that platform today? Elijah's voice was quiet but intense. I saw a woman who'd been beaten down by everyone who was supposed to love her. A woman who'd learned to make herself small, even though nothing about her is small. A woman who is 3 seconds away from giving up completely, but still standing there, still surviving, because that's what she does. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. That's not strength. That's just, you don't get to tell me what I see. Elijah cut her off. And I see strength. I see someone who survived things that would have broken most people. Who got up every morning and kept going, even when there was no reason to. I had to. No, you didn't. You could have given up. Could have stopped fighting. But you didn't. He held her gaze. That's worth more than any $200. Clara couldn't hold it back anymore. The tears came. Not the silent tears she'd learned to hide. Not the careful, controlled grief that didn't draw attention. Real crying. Messy and loud, and coming from somewhere so deep it felt like her soul was breaking open. Elijah didn't move, didn't reach for her, didn't try to comfort her with empty words or unwanted touch. He just sat there, solid and present, letting her fall apart without judgment. It took a long time for the tears to stop. When they finally did, Clara felt hollowed out, empty, but lighter somehow, like she'd set down something heavy she'd been carrying for so long she'd forgotten it wasn't part of her. Sorry, she whispered, wiping her face with her sleeve. Don't be. I don't, usually. I haven't cried in front of anyone, since maybe that's the problem. Elijah's voice was gentle. Keeping all that inside? It'll poison you eventually. Clara laughed weakly. Sounds like you speak from experience. I do. He stood and moved to a chest in the corner, pulling out blankets. After Emmy died, I didn't cry for a year. Thought if I held it together, I could keep going. Keep being strong for Rosie. He brought the blankets to the corner by the window and began arranging them into a makeshift bed. Then one night, I was out checking trap lines and I found Emmy's favorite spot. This clearing where she used to sit and watch the sunset. His hands stilled. I fell apart right there, cried until I couldn't breathe. Scared off every animal within a mile, probably. Clara watched him work. Did it help? Some. He finished with the blankets and turned to face her. Didn't fix anything. Didn't bring her back. But it let me breathe again. Let me start to heal instead of just survive. He gestured to the makeshift bed. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. Clara stood, her legs unsteady. Elijah. He paused at the ladder to the loft. Thank you. She meant it this time. Really meant it. I don't understand why you did what you did. Don't know if I'll ever understand. But thank you. Elijah nodded once. Get some rest, Clara. You're safe here. Then he climbed the ladder and disappeared into the loft, leaving her alone with the fire and the silence and the strange, fragile feeling that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found somewhere she could stop running.
Clara lay down on the makeshift bed. It was more comfortable than anything she'd slept on in years, and for the first time since she could remember, she fell asleep without fear. Morning came with the smell of coffee and the sound of small feet on the loft ladder. Clara opened her eyes to find Rosie standing over her, blonde hair wild from sleep, grinning like Christmas had come early. "You're still here!" Clara pushed herself up on one elbow. "Where else would I be?" "I don't know." Rosie plopped down on the floor beside her. "Sometimes people leave. Mama left. Not because she wanted to, but she still left. And then nobody came for a long time." Clara felt her heart crack. "I'm not leaving," she said quietly. "Promise?" Such a simple word, such an enormous weight. Clara thought about all the promises that had been broken in her life. All the time she'd been told things would get better, and they'd only gotten worse. All the reasons she had to be careful, to hedge her bets, to never commit to anything she couldn't control. Then she looked at this child, this 5-year-old girl who dreamed of angels and believed in miracles and trusted a stranger simply because her heart told her to. "I promise," Clara said. Rosie's smile could have lit up the whole mountain. "Papa's making breakfast," she announced. "He's not very good at it, but he tries. Mama was the good cook. Maybe you could teach him." "Maybe I could. Can you make cinnamon rolls? I've never had cinnamon rolls, but Papa told me about them once. Said Mama used to make them for special days." Clara felt something warm bloom in her chest. "I can make cinnamon rolls." Rosie's eyes went wide. "Really? You promise? Not a pretend promise, but a real one?" "A real one." The child threw her arms around Clara's neck. It was awkward. Clara was still lying down, and Rosie was all elbows and enthusiasm. But it was also the most genuine embrace Clara had received since her mother died. "I knew it," Rosie whispered fiercely. "I knew you were supposed to be here." Breakfast was simple. Oatmeal with honey. Coffee so strong it could probably strip paint. But Clara ate every bite, savoring the warmth and the sweetness and the strange normalcy of sitting at a table with 2 other people who didn't seem to hate her. "I need to check the trap lines today," Elijah said between bites. "Storm's coming in a few days. Want to make sure everything's secured before it hits." "Can Clara come?" Rosie bounced in her seat. "Can she see the animals? Can she meet Bess?" "That's up to Clara." Clara looked at Elijah. He was watching her with that unreadable expression again. "I'd like to help," she said carefully. "If there's work I can do." "There's always work." Elijah set down his spoon. "But you don't have to earn your place here. That's not what this is." "Then what is this?" The question hung in the air. Elijah was quiet for a moment. "Right now, it's breakfast. It's a place to stay while you figure out what you want. It's whatever you need it to be." He met her eyes. No expectations, no obligations. Just time. Time for what? For healing. For deciding who you are when you're not being told you're worthless. His voice softened. For figuring out what kind of life you want to build now that you've got the chance to build one. Clara felt tears threatening again and blinked them back. "I don't know how to do that." Neither did I after Emmy died. Still learning most days. Elijah stood and carried his bowl to the wash basin. "But that's the thing about time. It gives you room to figure things out." "Papa," Rosie tugged at his sleeve, "can Clara see the chickens now? Please?" Elijah looked at Clara. She nodded. "All right, Sprite. Show her the chickens, but stay close to the cabin. I'll be back before midday." Rosie grabbed Clara's hand and practically dragged her toward the door. "Come on! Bess is the cow, but the chickens are my favorite because they make funny noises, and sometimes they let me hold them if I'm very quiet. And you have to be gentle because they're scared of loud things, and—" Her voice trailed off as they stepped outside, and Clara found herself smiling. Actually smiling. When had she last smiled? She couldn't remember. The barn was warm and dim and smelled of hay and animals. Bess, a brown cow with gentle eyes, turned to watch them enter. The chickens scattered and then regrouped, curious about the newcomer. "This is Clara," Rosie announced to the animals solemnly. "She's going to live with us now. Papa says we have to be nice to her because she's had a hard time." Clara felt her throat tighten. "Your papa said that?" "Mm-hmm." Rosie picked up a chicken with practiced ease and held it out to Clara. "This is Henrietta. She's my favorite. She laid 2 eggs yesterday." Clara took the chicken carefully. It clucked once, then settled in her arms. "She likes you," Rosie said approvingly. "She doesn't like everyone. She pecked Billy Jenkins once when he came to buy eggs. Made him bleed." Clara froze. "Billy Jenkins came here?" "A long time ago, before Mama died." Rosie was already moving to the next chicken. "He was mean. Said things about Mama being too pretty for a mountain man like Papa. Papa told him to leave and never come back." Clara thought about Billy, the ranch hand. Billy, who'd bid $20 on her yesterday. Billy, who'd made jokes about needing a bigger bed. "Billy Jenkins," she said slowly, "was the one bidding on me at the auction." Rosie looked up. "The man who wanted to buy you? The mean one?" "Yes." The child's face went hard. Harder than any 5-year-old's face should be able to go. "I'm glad Papa bought you instead," she said fiercely. "I'm glad you didn't have to go with him. He has mean eyes. I don't like people with mean eyes." Clara set Henrietta down gently. "Neither do I." They stayed in the barn for another hour. Clara learned the names of all 6 chickens. She helped Rosie collect eggs. She stood quietly while Bess investigated her with a wet nose, then laughed when the cow licked her hand. "She likes you too," Rosie clapped. "Bess doesn't like many people. She tried to kick the last person who came to buy milk. Your animals are very protective." "Papa says they're good judges of character." Rosie looked up at Clara with those 2 wise eyes. "That's why I knew you were safe. The chickens didn't run away from you. Bess didn't try to kick you. They know you're good." Clara felt tears threatening again. "I'm not sure I'm good." "You are." Rosie took her hand. "You're just sad. Sad isn't the same as bad. Papa taught me that after Mama died. I was so sad I thought something was wrong with me. But Papa said sad just means you loved something that went away. And loving things isn't bad. It's brave." Clara stared at this child, this impossible, wise, certain child, who spoke of love and bravery like they were simple things, easy things, things everyone deserved. "How did you get so smart?" Clara asked. Rosie grinned. "I listen. Most people don't listen, but I do. Mama taught me. She said listening is how you learn what people really mean, not just what they say." Before Clara could respond, the barn door opened. Elijah stood in the doorway. "Trap lines are clear. Storm's coming faster than I thought." He looked at Rosie. "Time to come inside, Sprite." "But we're having fun." "You can have fun inside, too." Elijah's voice was gentle but firm. "Go help Clara figure out where everything is in the cabin. I'm going to secure the barn." Rosie sighed dramatically, but obeyed. As they walked back to the cabin, she chattered about the coming storm, about how the snow would pile up, and they'd be stuck inside for days, and Papa would tell stories by the fire, and maybe, just maybe, Clara could make those cinnamon rolls she'd promised. Clara listened, and for the first time in years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten how to recognize. Hope. Small and fragile, and terrified of being crushed. But there. Definitely there. The storm hit 2 days later. Clara woke to a world transformed. Snow piled against the windows. Wind howled around the cabin.
And inside, everything was warm and quiet and still. Elijah was already up, feeding the fire. Rosie was still asleep in the loft. "Mornin'," Elijah said without turning around. "Morning." Clara pushed herself up from her bed in the corner. 2 nights she'd slept here now. 2 nights of peace. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough. We'll be snowed in for 3, maybe 4 days." He finally turned to look at her. "Hope you're not the type to get cabin fever." Clara thought about her life before this. The tiny room in her father's house where she'd spent most of her time hiding from his rages. The hours of work followed by hours of silence. The crushing loneliness of being surrounded by people who wished she didn't exist. "I've spent most of my life in small spaces with people who didn't want me there," she said quietly. "I think I can manage a few days with people who do." Something shifted in Elijah's face. "Good," he said finally, "because I've been thinking." Clara tensed. Here it was. The catch. The price. The moment when he would tell her what he really wanted, and she would have to decide whether to give it or run. "I want to build you a room." Clara blinked. "What?" "A room." Elijah gestured at the corner where she'd been sleeping. "Real walls. A door. Your own space. You shouldn't have to sleep in the open like this." Clara felt her carefully constructed defenses crumbling. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." Elijah's voice was firm. "I want to. Everyone deserves their own space. Everyone deserves privacy. And if you're going to stay here, you are staying, aren't you?" The question hung between them. Clara thought about the auction block, about her father walking away without looking back, about Rosie's arms around her neck, and Henrietta the chicken settling trustingly in her arms, and Bess licking her hand. "Yes," she said, "I'm staying." Elijah nodded, and for just a moment, Clara could have sworn she saw him smile. They spent the storm building her walls. Elijah measured and cut, while Clara held boards and handed him tools. Rosie flitted between them, chattering and laughing, and occasionally being genuinely helpful. It felt like something Clara had only read about in books. It felt like family. "Higher on your end," Elijah said, and Clara adjusted the board she was holding. "Good. Hold it there." He hammered in the nails with quick, practiced strokes. "You're good at this," Clara observed. "Had to be. Everything up here, I built it myself." Elijah moved to the next section. The cabin, the barn, Emmy's grave marker. Clara's hands faltered. "Where is she buried?" "Up on the ridge. She always loved the view from there." Elijah's voice was quiet but steady. "I can take you to visit sometime, if you want." "I'd like that." Silence fell between them. Comfortable now. The kind of silence that came from people who were starting to understand each other. "Papa!" Rosie's voice rang down from the loft. "When will Clara's room be done?" "Tomorrow, if we keep working." "Can I help paint it? Can we make it pretty? Clara deserves pretty things." Clara felt her throat tighten. "Rosie," she called up, "it doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be." The child's face appeared at the edge of the loft. "But you're pretty," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Pretty people should have pretty rooms." Clara stared at her. No one had ever called her pretty, not once in her entire life. "I'm not," she started. "You are." Rosie's voice was certain. "Your eyes are pretty, and your hair, and the way you smile when you think nobody's looking." "You're pretty, Clara." Anyone who said different was lying. Clara turned away quickly, blinking back tears. Elijah didn't say anything, but when she glanced at him, he was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. And somehow, that was enough. By the 3rd day of the storm, the walls were done. Clara stood in her new room, her room, running her hands over the rough wood.
It was barely 8 feet square, just enough space for a bed and a small shelf, and nothing else.
But it had a window, and it had a door that closed, and it was hers.
"Papa says you can paint it any color you want," Rosie announced from the doorway. "He has paint left over from when he made Mama's hope chest. It's blue. Do you like blue?"
I love blue. Rosie grinned.
"Then it'll be blue, and I'll help. And it'll be the prettiest room in the whole cabin."
That night, after Rosie was asleep, Clara found Elijah sitting at the table, working on a small wooden horse.
"For Rosie?" she asked.
"Christmas present. She's been asking for one." He didn't look up from his work. "Sit down. You've been on your feet all day." Clara sat across from him. The fire crackled between them. Outside, the wind still howled, but inside, everything was warm.
"Elijah." He looked up. "Thank you."
Clara's voice was thick.
"For the room. For everything. I don't know how to be grateful enough."
"Don't have to be grateful." Elijah set down the wooden horse. "Just have to be here." "Why is that enough?" The question came out before she could stop it. Elijah was quiet for a long moment. "Because for 4 years this cabin's been empty. Even with me and Rosie in it, it's been empty. And now, it's not." He met her eyes. "You asked me why I did what I did at that auction. The truth is, I don't know. But I know what I've seen since you got here." "What have you seen?" Rosie laughing, really laughing. The kind of laughing she hasn't done since Emmy died. His voice roughened. "Food that tastes like someone cares about making it. Conversations that aren't just me talking to myself or a 5-year-old who's too young to understand." He paused. "Life. I've seen life come back into this cabin, and I don't care why it happened or whether it makes sense. I'm just grateful it did." Clara felt the tears come. This time, she didn't try to stop them.
"I've never been someone's answer to anything," she whispered. "I've only ever been someone's problem."
"Then everyone before me was a fool." Elijah stood, moved around the table, and stopped in front of her chair. "You're not a problem, Clara. You're a gift. And someday, when you've been here long enough and healed enough, you're going to see yourself the way Rosie and I see you."
"How do you see me?"
The question came out broken. Elijah knelt down, bringing himself eye level with her. "I see someone worth fighting for. Someone worth building walls for. Someone who makes my daughter smile and my cabin feel like a home again." His voice dropped. "I see someone I'm very glad Rosie dreamed about." Clara couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only sit there while tears ran down her face and this impossible man said impossible things that she desperately wanted to believe. "Get some sleep," Elijah said finally, standing. "Storm should break by morning. Lot of work to do once it clears." He climbed the ladder to the loft, and Clara sat alone by the fire, crying for the second time in a week. But this time, the tears weren't grief. They were something else entirely, something that felt terrifyingly, wonderfully, impossibly like hope. The storm broke on the 4th morning, leaving behind a world blanketed in white silence. Clara woke in her new room, her room, with walls that smelled of fresh-cut pine and a door she could close whenever she wanted. For a long moment, she just lay there, listening to the quiet, trying to convince herself this was real. 3 weeks. 3 weeks since the auction. 3 weeks since Elijah Brennan paid $200 for her freedom. 3 weeks of meals shared at a rough wooden table, of Rosie's laughter filling the cabin, of learning what it felt like to be treated like a person instead of a burden. 3 weeks of something that felt dangerously close to happiness. Clara pushed herself up and opened her door to find Rosie already at the table, drawing pictures in flour while Elijah made coffee. "Clara's awake," Rosie announced.
Papa, can we make cinnamon rolls today? Clara promised.
She promised weeks ago, and we haven't made them yet because of the storm. But now the storm's done, and she promised. Elijah glanced at Clara, a question in his eyes. I did promise, Clara admitted. Then I reckon we're making cinnamon rolls. Elijah handed her a cup of coffee. Storm's cleared enough for me to check the trap lines. Should be back before midday.
Can I come?
Rosie bounced in her seat.
Please, Papa, please.
Not this time, Sprite. Snow's too deep. You stay here and help Clara with those rolls. Rosie pouted, but didn't argue. Clara watched Elijah pull on his coat and hat, checking his rifle before heading for the door. Somewhere in the last 3 weeks, she'd started noticing things about him. The way he always looked back before leaving, making sure they were settled. The way his eyes softened when he looked at Rosie. The way he never, not once, made her feel like she was taking up too much space.
Be careful,
she said, and then felt her face heat. Too familiar, too presumptuous. But Elijah just nodded. Always am. Bar the door after I leave. Don't open it for anyone but me. The words sent a chill down Clara's spine.
Are you expecting trouble?
No, his jaw tightened. But I've learned not to trust expectation. He left, and Clara barred the door behind him, her heart beating faster than it should. The cinnamon rolls were a disaster, not because Clara didn't know how to make them. She'd learned from her mother before everything fell apart. But Rosie's help consisted mostly of eating raw dough and getting flour everywhere. And by the time the rolls were in the makeshift oven, both of them were covered in sticky mess and laughing so hard they could barely breathe. You've got flour on your nose, Rosie gasped. You've got flour everywhere. It's not my fault. The dough attacked me. Clara pulled the child into her lap and wiped her face with a damp cloth. Rosie squirmed, but didn't pull away. Instead, she settled against Clara's chest, suddenly quiet.
Clara? Do you like it here?
Clara's hands stilled. Yes, I like it very much.
Do you like Papa?
The question was innocent, direct, the way only a 5-year-old could ask. Your papa's a good man, Clara said carefully. That's not what I asked. Rosie tilted her head back to look up at Clara.
I asked if you like him, the way Mama liked him, the way people in stories like each other.
Clara felt her face flush. Rosie, that's not why don't you want Papa to be happy. The question stopped Clara cold. Of course I do. He's been so sad since Mama died, for so long. But now he smiles sometimes. When you're around. Rosie's voice was matter-of-fact. I think you make him happy. And I think he makes you happy too. So why can't you like each other? Clara didn't know what to say. How did you explain to a 5-year-old that liking someone and being able to have them were different things? That a man like Elijah deserved better than a woman everyone called worthless? That even if she felt something she couldn't quite name yet, it didn't mean she was worthy of feeling it.
It's complicated,
Clara said finally.
Grown-ups always say that,
Rosie sighed dramatically.
But it's not complicated. You're sad. Papa's sad. You could be unsad together.
That's simple. Before Clara could respond, she heard it. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses coming fast up the trail. Clara's blood went cold. Rosie. She kept her voice calm, even as fear clawed at her chest. I need you to go up to the loft. Right now. Don't come down until I tell you it's safe. Rosie's eyes went wide. What's wrong? Probably nothing, but Papa said to be careful, and I'm being careful. Please, sweetheart, go upstairs. Rosie went. Clara moved to the window and looked out. 3 riders. No, 4. Coming up through the trees toward the cabin.
Even from this distance, she could see they weren't dressed for mountain living. Town clothes, town horses, and leading them, a face she recognized. Her father. Clara's knees went weak. No, not now, not here, not when she'd finally started to believe she might be safe. The riders stopped in front of the cabin. Silas Jenkins dismounted, swaying slightly. Even from inside, Clara could tell he was drunk. He was always drunk. "Clara May!" His voice cracked through the morning air. "I know you're in there, girl. Come on out." Clara didn't move. "I said come out." Silas's voice turned ugly. "You and me got business to discuss. Legal business." One of the other riders dismounted. Clara recognized Jasper Carver from the general store. Behind him, two more men she didn't know, but could guess. Town council, probably. Men who'd stood by while she was auctioned and were now here to, what, take her back? "Miss Hendress," Carver's oily voice carried through the door. "We need to speak with you about the legality of your current situation." Clara found her voice. "I'm not coming out." "Now, Miss Hendress, there's nothing to discuss." Clara pressed her back against the door. "I have papers, legal papers. I don't belong to my father anymore." "Those papers," Silas spat, "are worthless. I was drunk when I signed them, didn't know what I was doing, and now I've got witnesses saying that mountain man coerced me, threatened me. Lies. All lies." "The deal was legal and binding," Clara said. "Mr. Carver witnessed it himself." Silence from outside. Then Carver's voice, smoother now. "Well, that's what we're here to sort out, isn't it? There have been questions raised about Mr. Brennan's intentions, about what exactly he's been doing with you up here in this cabin. Alone." Clara felt sick. "Nothing improper has happened." "Then you won't mind coming to town to confirm that? To the sheriff? Under oath." Carver paused. "Unless you've got something to hide." "I'm not leaving." "It's not a request, girl." Silas's voice rose. "You're my daughter, my property, and I want you back." "I'm not your property anymore." "Like hell you're not." Something slammed against the door. A fist, maybe. "Open this door right now or I'll break it down." From above, Clara heard Rosie whimper. "There's a child in here," Clara called out, her voice shaking. "Leave now, or I swear to God I'll get him." A cruel laugh from Silas. "What are you gonna do, shoot me? You couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, and even if you could, then what? You think that mountain man's gonna want you after you murdered your own father?" He laughed again. "Face it, girl, you've got nowhere to go. Might as well come out and accept it." Clara's mind raced. Elijah was checking trap lines. Could be back any moment. Could be hours away. She had no way of knowing. The rifle was mounted above the fireplace. She knew how to use it. Her mother had taught her before she died. But Silas was right about one thing. Could she really shoot her own father? "I'm counting to 10, Silas called. "Then we're coming in, one way or another."
"Papa!"
The voice was Rosie's. Clara spun to see the child at the top of the ladder, face white with terror.
"Rosie, stay up there."
"But they're going to hurt you." Tears streamed down Rosie's face. "They're going to take you away, and I can't lose you too." Clara's heart shattered. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, even though she wasn't sure it was true. "I promise, I'm not going anywhere." 3, Silas's count came from outside. 4, 5. Clara grabbed the rifle from above the fireplace. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. 6, 7. She moved to the window, aimed at the sky, pulled the trigger. The shot cracked through the mountain air like thunder. Silence.
Next one goes through the door. Clara's voice was stronger now, steadied by rage and fear and the desperate need to protect the child crying in the loft. And I won't miss. I swear to God, I won't miss. She heard cursing, arguing, her father's voice rising in fury, then being cut off by Carver. All right, Miss Hendress. Carver's voice was tight now, less confident. All right, we'll leave. For now. But we'll be back with the sheriff. Legal and proper. And then you'll have to answer for what's happening here. Nothing's happening here except you trespassing on private property. Now get off this land before Mr. Brennan gets back and shows you what a real rifle looks like. More arguing. The sound of horses shifting. Then finally, the blessed noise of hoofbeats retreating down the mountain. Clara's legs gave out. She collapsed against the door, the rifle falling from her numb fingers, and sobbed. Great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep and wounded and absolutely terrified. Small arms wrapped around her neck. Rosie had come down from the loft.
You did it,
the child whispered fiercely.
You saved us. You scared them away. They'll come back.
Clara couldn't stop shaking.
They said they'd bring the sheriff. Then Papa will stop them. Papa won't let them take you.
Rosie's voice was certain, absolute. You're ours now. You belong to us. And we don't let people take what belongs to us. Clara pulled the child close and cried harder. Elijah returned an hour later. Clara heard his horse first, and her heart stopped. But then Rosie was flying out the door, screaming, "Papa! Papa!" And Clara knew it was him. He burst into the cabin moments later, Rosie in his arms, his face white. "What happened? Rosie said men came, said you had to shoot." I fired a warning shot. Clara was still sitting where she'd collapsed, against the door.
They left, but they said they'd be back with the sheriff.
Elijah set Rosie down and crossed to Clara, kneeling in front of her. "Are you hurt?"
"No."
"Rosie?"
"She's fine. Scared, but fine."
Elijah's jaw tightened. "Who was it?"
"My father. Carver from the general store. 2 other men I didn't recognize."
Clara's voice cracked.
"He said the papers weren't legal."
"Said he was drunk when he signed them and didn't know what he was doing. Said he wants me back." Something dangerous flickered in Elijah's eyes. "Over my dead body." "Elijah, no." His voice was hard, final. "I don't care what he said or what lies he's spreading. Those papers are legal. I made damn sure of it. And no drunk, no shopkeeper, no sheriff is going to come up here and take you away."
"But if they come with a law?"
"Then we face them together." Elijah reached out and took her hands. His were warm, steady. "You're under my protection, Clara. Have been since that day in the town square. And I don't abandon people under my protection." Clara stared at him. At this man who'd paid $200 for her freedom, who'd built her walls and given her space and treated her like she mattered, who was now kneeling in front of her, holding her hands, promising to fight for her.
"Why?"
The question came out broken. "Why do you keep doing this? Fighting for me? I'm not worth—" "Don't." His grip tightened. "Don't you dare say you're not worth it. Don't you dare let them win by believing their lies."
"But they're not lies."
Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks.
"I'm big and plain and nobody wants me. And my own father tried to sell me twice now. And you've seen me. You've seen what I am."
"I have seen what you are." Elijah's voice dropped. "I've seen you comfort my daughter when she cries. I've seen you work harder than anyone I've ever known, just to feel like you've earned your place. I've seen you make this cabin feel like a home again, after 4 years of emptiness." His thumbs traced circles on the backs of her hands. I've seen you, Clara. The real you. And you're worth more than you know. Clara couldn't breathe.
Elijah?
I'm going to town tomorrow, he said. Going to talk to the sheriff myself. Set things straight before your father can spin any more lies. I'm coming with you. No, it's too dangerous. If they see you, I'm not hiding. Clara's voice steadied. I'm not going to spend my life hiding from my father and his cruelty. If there's a fight coming, I want to face it. I want to stand up and say what's true, instead of letting other people decide my story. Elijah studied her face. Something shifted in his expression. All right, he said finally. We'll go together. Rosie can stay with old Miller at the trading post. He owes me a favor. And if the sheriff sides with my father? Elijah's jaw tightened. Then we'll deal with that too. But Clara, he held her gaze. No matter what happens, you're not going back to him. I swear it. You're never going back to that life. Clara believed him. God help her, she believed him. That night, after Rosie was asleep, Clara found Elijah sitting at the table, cleaning his rifle. She sat across from him. Neither of them spoke for a long moment.
I should tell you something, Clara said finally.
Elijah looked up.
About my father. About why he hates me so much.
Clara's hands twisted together on the table.
You should know, before we face him again.
You don't have to.
I do.
Clara took a breath.
My mother died giving birth to my brother. He was stillborn. A boy. The son my father always wanted. She felt the old pain rise up, familiar as breathing. I was 5 years old.
I remember standing at her grave while my father told me it was my fault. That if I'd been a boy, she wouldn't have needed to try again. That I killed her by being born wrong. Elijah's hands stilled on the rifle. He's been telling me that ever since. 23 years of being told I was worthless. That I was too big, too plain, too much. That no man would ever want me. That I was a burden he couldn't wait to be rid of. Clara met Elijah's eyes. I believed him. For so long, I believed him. And sometimes, in the dark, I still do. I still hear his voice telling me I'm nothing, and I believe it. Silence. Then Elijah set down the rifle and reached across the table to take her hands. Your father is a monster, he said quietly. He took a child who just lost her mother and made her believe she was responsible. He spent 2 decades destroying your soul because he was too weak to face his own grief. His grip tightened. But he was wrong, Clara, about all of it. You didn't kill your mother. You weren't born wrong. And you're not worthless.
How can you know that? How can you be so sure?
Because I've seen worthless. Elijah's voice went hard. I've seen men who abandon their families, who hurt people weaker than them, who sell their own daughters to pay gambling debts. That's worthless. He released one of her hands and touched her face. Clara froze. It was the first time he'd touched her like that. Gentle, deliberate, like she was something precious. You're not worthless, he said again. You're the opposite of worthless. And I'm going to spend every day you're here proving it to you. Clara felt something crack open in her chest. Something she'd kept locked away for 23 years.
Elijah.
Yes?
I'm scared.
I know.
I'm scared of my father. I'm scared of the town. I'm scared that I'll start believing in this and then lose it.
Her voice broke. I'm scared that you'll wake up one day and realize you made a mistake. I won't.
You don't know that.
I do. He held her gaze. Because I've already made the biggest mistake of my life once. I stayed away when Emmy needed help.
I thought I could protect her by keeping her isolated, and she died because of it. Pain crossed his face. I won't make that mistake again. I won't push away someone who needs me because I'm too scared to care. I learned that lesson the hardest way possible. Clara was crying again. She'd cried more in 3 weeks than in 3 years. Get some sleep, Elijah said finally, releasing her face. Tomorrow's going to be hard. We'll need our strength. Clara nodded and stood. At the door to her room, she paused.
Elijah?
Yeah?
Thank you. For everything. For fighting for me. For believing in me even when I don't believe in myself.
Elijah looked at her, and for the first time, Clara saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip. You're worth fighting for, Clara. Never forget that. She went to bed and dreamed of angels and answered prayers and a future she was finally starting to believe she might deserve. They rode into Copper Creek just as the morning sun hit the church steeple. Clara sat behind Elijah on the big bay horse, her arms wrapped around his waist, her heart hammering against her ribs. The last time she'd been in this town, she'd been standing on an auction block while people laughed at her. The last time she'd seen these streets, she'd been riding away with a stranger and his daughter, not knowing if she was heading towards salvation or damnation. Now she was back, and she was terrified. You're shaking, Elijah said quietly. I know. You don't have to do this. I can talk to the sheriff alone. No, Clara tightened her grip. I need to face them. I need to show them I'm not the same woman they tried to sell. Elijah didn't argue. They'd left Rosie with old Miller at the trading post, just outside town. The old trapper had taken one look at Elijah's face and agreed without questions. Bring her back safe, he'd said, nodding at Clara. That little girl talks about nothing else these days. Now they were here, and people were staring. Clara could feel their eyes as they rode down the main street. Whispers followed them like shadows. She saw women turn away, saw men exchange knowing looks, saw the judgment and speculation spreading like wildfire. There she is, the fat one Brennan bought, living up in his cabin like a common. What do you think he's doing with her? Probably thinks she's better than us now. Clara lifted her chin. Let them think what they wanted. Let them whisper and judge and assume the worst. She was done being ashamed of surviving. The sheriff's office sat at the end of the street, a squat wooden building with bars on the windows. Elijah dismounted first, then helped Clara down. His hands lingered on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. Ready? No. Clara straightened her dress, one of Emmy's that she'd altered to fit. But let's do it anyway. They walked inside together. Sheriff Tom Clayton looked up from his desk. He was older than Clara expected, gray-haired and weathered, with eyes that had seen too much of humanity's ugliness to be easily shocked. But something flickered across his face when he saw them. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Mr. Brennan, Miss Hendress. He stood slowly. I was wondering when you'd show up. You know why we're here, Elijah said. I can guess. Clayton gestured to 2 chairs in front of his desk. Silas Jenkins came to see me yesterday. Him and Jasper Carver and a couple of council members. Had a lot to say about the situation up at your cabin. Clara felt her stomach drop. What did they say? Clayton studied her for a long moment. Why don't you tell me your side first? Then we'll talk about what they said. So Clara told him. She told him about the auction, about her father selling her to pay his debts, about Elijah paying $200 for her freedom, about the papers signed and witnessed and legal. She told him about the cabin, about Rosie and her dreams, about building walls and making cinnamon rolls, and learning what it felt like to be treated like a human being for the first time in her life. She told him about the men who came, about her father demanding she come out, about firing a warning shot because she was afraid they would break down the door and take her by force. Through it all, Clayton listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. "That's quite a story, Miss Hendress. It's the truth. I believe you." Clayton's eyes went to Elijah. "Mr. Brennan, you got anything to add?" "Just one thing." Elijah pulled a folded paper from his coat. "These are the original documents, signed by Silas Jenkins, witnessed by Jasper Carver, stating that all debts are satisfied and he relinquishes any claim on his daughter. Legal and binding." Clayton took the papers and examined them carefully. "These look legitimate." "They are legitimate." Elijah's voice was hard. "Whatever lies Silas is spreading about being coerced or not understanding what he signed, that's all they are. Lies. He knew exactly what he was doing. He took my money, signed those papers, and went straight to the saloon to spend it." Clayton set down the papers. "I know." Clara blinked. "You know?" "I wasn't there that day, but I've heard enough accounts from people who were." Clayton's voice was tired, weary. "I know Silas Jenkins is a drunk and a gambler who's been trying to get rid of you for years. I know Jasper Carver ran that auction like it was entertainment. And I know half this town stood by and watched it happen because they were too cowardly or too cruel to do anything else." He met Clara's eyes. "I also know that what happened to you was wrong. Legal, maybe, but wrong." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Then why did you let them come to the cabin? Why didn't you stop them?" "Because I didn't know they were going until after they'd already gone." Clayton's jaw tightened. "Silas came to me yesterday, claiming you'd been taken against your will. Said Brennan had threatened him, coerced him, kidnapped his daughter. Said he wanted you back. He's lying. I know he's lying. But he's got Carver backing his story, and Carver's got influence in this town." Clayton spread his hands. "I told them I'd look into it. That's why I'm glad you came to me first." Elijah leaned forward. "So, what happens now?" "Now?" Clayton considered. "Now, I need to make this official. I need Miss Hendress to state, on the record, that she's living at your cabin of her own free will, that you haven't harmed or coerced her, that she doesn't wish to return to her father's care." "I'll state that," Clara said immediately. "I'll swear it on a Bible if you want." "That won't be necessary." Clayton pulled out a sheet of paper and a pen. "But I will need you to sign a statement, something I can show to Silas and the council that makes your position clear." Clara took the pen. Her hand was steady as she wrote, steadier than it had any right to be. "I, Clara May Jenkins, do hereby state that I am living at the residence of Mr. Elijah Brennan of my own free will. I have not been coerced, threatened, or harmed in any way. I do not wish to return to my father's care. The arrangement between Mr. Brennan and Mr. Silas Jenkins was legal and binding, and I consider myself free of any obligation to my father." She signed her name at the bottom. Clara May Jenkins. Maybe for the last time. "That should do it," Clayton said, taking the paper. "I'll make sure Silas sees this. And I'll make it clear that any further harassment of you or Mr. Brennan will be dealt with severely." "You think that'll stop him?" Elijah's voice was skeptical. "Honestly, no," Clayton sighed. "Your father's not going to give up that easy, Miss Hendress. He's got it in his head that you owe him something, and drunk men don't let go of grievances." "So what do we do?" "You go back to that cabin and you live your life. If he comes after you again, you send word to me. I'll deal with it." Clayton stood. "In the meantime, I'll have a word with Carver about his involvement. Remind him that harassment is still a crime, even when the victim is someone folks think they can treat like livestock." Clara felt something loosen in her chest. "Thank you, Sheriff." "Don't thank me yet." Clayton walked them to the door. "Your father's not going to let this go. And there are people in this town who'll take his side just because they don't like the idea of a woman making her own choices.
You've got a fight ahead of you.
I know,
Clara said.
but at least now I'm not fighting alone.
She glanced at Elijah. He was already looking at her. Something passed between them in that moment. Something that had been building for weeks. Something neither of them was quite ready to name.
Let's go home,
Elijah said quietly. Home. The word wrapped around Clara's heart and squeezed. They were halfway to the door when it slammed open. Silas Jenkins stood in the doorway. He looked worse than Clara remembered. Thinner, more haggard. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hands were shaking with either rage or withdrawal. Behind him, Carver hovered like a weasel waiting for scraps. "There she is," Silas's voice cracked with fury. "There's my ungrateful bitch of a daughter, spreading lies about her own father." Elijah stepped in front of Clara. "Get out of the way, Jenkins." "Or what? You'll hit me? Go ahead. Give me a reason to have you arrested." Silas laughed, a wet, ugly sound.
Think I don't know what you've been doing with her up in that cabin? Think the whole town doesn't know?
"Nothing improper has happened," Clara said, stepping out from behind Elijah. "And you know it." "I don't know anything of the kind." Silas's eyes found her, filled with venom. "All I know is my daughter got herself bought by a stranger and has been living in sin with him for weeks. All I know is she fired a rifle at her own father when he came to bring her home. You came to drag me back against my will. I defended myself." "You defended yourself?" Silas spat on the floor. "Against what? Against a father who fed you and clothed you and kept a roof over your worthless head for 28 years? "You sold me," Clara's voice rose. "You put me on a block and sold me like cattle. You don't get to pretend you were ever a father to me." "I did what I had to do. You think I wanted to sell you? You think I had a choice?" Silas's face twisted. "You ate me out of house and home for years. Big as a barn and twice as useless. No man would marry you. What was I supposed to do? Support you forever?" Clara felt the words land like blows. Old words. Familiar words. Words she'd heard 1,000 times. But this time, something was different. This time, she didn't believe them. "You're pathetic," she said quietly. Silas froze. "What did you say?" "I said, you're pathetic." Clara stepped forward. Elijah tried to stop her, but she shook him off. "You've spent 23 years blaming me for Mama's death, telling me I was worthless, making me feel like a burden for the crime of existing." Her voice grew stronger. "But it was never about me, was it? It was about you. About your guilt. About the fact that you were too drunk to get Mama to a doctor in time. About the son you wanted but couldn't have because you couldn't afford another mouth to feed." "You shut your mouth." "No." Clara was shaking, but her voice didn't waver. "I'm done being quiet. I'm done being ashamed. I'm done letting you make me feel like nothing." She looked at Silas, really looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see a monster. She saw a broken man, a weak man, a man who'd destroyed his own daughter because he was too small to face his own failures. "You're never going to hurt me again," she said. "I'm not your property. I'm not your burden. I'm not anything to you anymore." Silas's face went purple with rage. He lunged at her. Elijah moved faster. One moment Silas was reaching for Clara, the next he was on the ground, Elijah's knee in his back, his arm twisted behind him. "Touch her again," Elijah's voice was deadly quiet, "and I'll break every bone in your body." "Get off me! Clayton! You saw that! He attacked me!" Sheriff Clayton hadn't moved from his desk. "What I saw," he said slowly, "was a man trying to assault a woman and getting stopped. What I saw was self-defense." "He's lying. They're both lying. She's my daughter. I have rights." "You have no rights," Clara's voice cut through Silas's protests.
You signed them away for $200, and I have the papers to prove it."
Silas went still. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You think you've won? You haven't won anything. You're still a fat, worthless nobody. And when he gets tired of you, when he throws you out like the trash you are, don't come crawling back to me." Elijah hauled Silas to his feet. "Clara's never going to need anything from you again. Now get out." He shoved Silas toward the door. Silas stumbled, caught himself, and turned to look at Clara one last time. "You're dead to me," he said. Clara lifted her chin.
"Good. I've been dead to you since Mama passed. At least now it's mutual."
Silas left. Carver hesitated in the doorway, looking between Clara and the sheriff. "This isn't the end of it," he said. "People are talking. Questions are being asked about what's really happening up in that cabin. It's not decent, an unmarried man and woman living together like that." "Then maybe we should make it decent," Elijah said. Everyone in the room went still. Clara turned to look at him. Elijah was looking at her, only at her. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I'm saying what I should have said weeks ago." Elijah took her hands. "I'm saying that you're not a burden to me, Clara. You're not someone I'm protecting out of obligation. You're someone I care about. Someone I want in my life. Permanently." Clara couldn't breathe. "Elijah!" "I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But I know how I feel. And I know that Rosie loves you. And I know that for the first time since Emmy died, I don't feel alone anymore." His voice dropped. "Marry me, Clara. Not because of what anyone thinks. Not to make things decent. Because I want you to be my wife." Clara stared at him. This man, this impossible, stubborn, beautiful man who'd paid $200 for her freedom and asked for nothing in return, who'd built her walls and given her space and treated her like she mattered, who was now standing in the sheriff's office in front of witnesses, asking her to be his wife. "I'm not," her voice cracked, "I'm not what you deserve. I'm too big, too plain, too—" "You're exactly what I deserve, and what I want." Elijah's grip tightened on her hands. "The question is whether I'm what you want." Clara thought about her life before this. The years of shame and cruelty. The constant drumbeat of worthless, worthless, worthless that had shaped every thought and action. Then she thought about the last 3 weeks. Rosie's laughter, cinnamon rolls, a room with walls and a door that closed. Being seen, being valued, being wanted. "Yes," she said. The word came out small, trembling, but certain. "Yes," she said again, stronger. "I'll marry you." Elijah's face transformed. It was the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. Not a ghost of a smile, not a twitch of lips. A real, full smile that lit up his storm-gray eyes and made him look 10 years younger. He pulled her into his arms, right there in the sheriff's office, right there in front of Carver and Clayton and anyone else who might be watching. He held her like she was precious, like she was wanted, like she was home. "About damn time," Sheriff Clayton muttered. Carver made a strangled sound and fled. Clara buried her face in Elijah's chest and laughed. Actually laughed. The kind of laugh that came from somewhere deep and joyful and free. "We should get back to Rosie," she said finally, pulling back. "Tell her the news." "She's going to be insufferable," Elijah was still smiling. "She'll say she knew all along. She did know all along." "Yeah." He touched her face, gentle and reverent. "I reckon she did." They walked out of the sheriff's office hand in hand. The town was still watching, still whispering. But Clara didn't care anymore. Let them talk. Let them judge. Let them think whatever they wanted. She had something they didn't have.
She had someone who saw her, really saw her, and loved her anyway. She had a home. She had a family. She had a future. And as they rode out of Copper Creek together, the mountains rising before them like promises, Clara Mae Jenkins felt something she'd never felt before. Not hope. More than hope. Peace. She was finally, after 28 years of being told she was nothing, exactly where she was supposed to be. Rosie screamed so loud when they told her that old Miller came running with his rifle. She said yes! The child launched herself at Clara, nearly knocking her over.
She said yes. She said yes. She said yes. I knew it. I knew you were supposed to be my mama. I dreamed it. Clara caught her laughing at the same time. You did dream it, sweetheart. You were right all along. I'm always right. Rosie pulled back, her face suddenly serious. Papa, you have to do it proper. You have to get down on one knee. That's how it works in stories.
Elijah raised an eyebrow. I already asked her.
But I didn't see it. It doesn't count if I didn't see it.
Clara looked at Elijah. He looked at her. And then, right there in front of old Miller's trading post, with a 5-year-old girl bouncing impatiently and an old trapper trying not to laugh, Elijah Brennan got down on one knee. Clara Mae Jenkins, he said, his voice rough but steady. Will you marry me and be a mother to my daughter and make our cabin a home? Clara felt tears streaming down her face.
Yes, she said again. 1,000 times yes,
Rosie cheered. Old Miller wiped his eyes and muttered something about dust, and Clara let herself believe, truly believe, for the first time, that she was going to be happy. The wedding was set for 2 weeks later. They could have done it faster. Sheriff Clayton had offered to find a preacher willing to come up immediately, but Rosie insisted they needed time to prepare, time to make things pretty, time to make Clara the best dress in the whole territory.
You can't get married in a regular dress, Rosie said firmly. You need a special dress, a white one, like snow.
I don't think we can find a white dress that fits me, Clara said gently.
Then we'll make one.
And somehow, impossibly, they did. Clara used the last of Emmy's fabric, cream-colored cotton that had been stored in a trunk for years, waiting for a purpose. Rosie helped, which meant mostly getting tangled in thread and offering opinions on everything. Elijah stayed carefully out of the way, banished to the barn whenever sewing was happening.
It's bad luck to see the dress before the wedding, Rosie informed him solemnly. Is that so? It's a rule, Clara said.
Clara hadn't said anything of the sort, but she didn't correct the child. There was something sweet about Elijah pretending to believe his 5-year-old's made-up wedding traditions. Something that felt like family. The dress came together slowly. Clara had to let out seams and add panels and remake entire sections. It wasn't going to be elegant. It wasn't going to be what any other bride might wear. But it was going to be hers. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel ashamed of that. 3 days before the wedding, Sheriff Clayton rode up to the cabin. Clara saw him coming and felt her stomach drop. Had something happened? Had her father made more trouble? Had the town decided they wouldn't allow the marriage after all? But Clayton's face, when he dismounted, wasn't grim. It was almost gentle. Miss Hendress, Mr. Brennan, he tipped his hat. Got some news I thought you should hear. Elijah stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Clara, protective even now. What kind of news? Silas Jenkins is dead. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, feeling the information settle into her bones. How? Elijah asked. Froze to death behind the saloon. Clayton's voice was matter-of-fact. 3 nights ago, from what the doc can tell. Drank himself unconscious and never woke up. Clara waited for something. Grief, relief, satisfaction, something. But all she felt was empty.
Did he suffer?
She heard herself ask. Probably not. The cold would have taken him before he knew what was happening.
Doc says he never felt a thing.
Clara nodded slowly.
Good. I wouldn't have wished suffering on him. But you're not sorry he's gone?
It wasn't a question.
No, Clara's voice was steady. I'm not sorry. He stopped being my father the day he decided I was worth less than his whiskey. I've been mourning that loss for 23 years. I won't mourn it again.
Clayton studied her for a long moment.
There's something else you should know, he said finally.
Before he died, Silas told some people he was planning to come up here, cause more trouble, make you regret choosing someone else over him. Clara felt Elijah tense beside her.
He never got the chance, Clayton continued. But I thought you should know, in case you needed closure.
Is that what this is? Clara asked. Closure?
That's for you to decide. Clayton mounted his horse. I just thought you deserved to know you don't have to look over your shoulder anymore. It's done. He can't hurt you now.
He rode away, leaving Clara standing in front of the cabin, with Elijah's hand warm on her back.
You all right? Elijah asked quietly.
Clara considered the question.
Was she all right? Her father was dead.
The man who'd spent 23 years destroying her was gone forever. She'd never have to hear his voice again, never have to see the disgust in his eyes when he looked at her. She was free, truly free.
Yes, she said. I'm all right.
Clara,
I mean it.
She turned to face him.
I thought I'd feel more, grief or anger or something. But all I feel is relieved. Is that wrong? Does that make me a terrible person?
It makes you human. Elijah pulled her close. He hurt you for so long. It's okay to be relieved it's over. Clara pressed her face into his chest.
I don't want to think about him anymore. I don't want to give him any more of my life than he's already taken.
Then don't. Elijah's arms tightened around her. Think about the wedding instead. Think about Rosie and the cabin and the life we're going to build. He doesn't get to be part of that. He never did. Clara nodded against his chest, and when she finally pulled back, her eyes were dry.
Let's go inside, she said. I need to finish my dress.
The wedding day arrived, cold and clear. Clara woke before dawn, too nervous to sleep. She lay in her room with walls Elijah had built and a door that closed, and listened to the cabin come alive around her. Rosie's feet on the loft floor. Elijah's voice, low and warm, telling her to be quiet because Clara was still sleeping. The crackle of the fire being stoked. The smell of coffee. Home sounds. Family sounds. Clara got up and put on the cream-colored dress she'd made. It wasn't white. It wasn't elegant. But when she looked at herself in the small mirror by the wash basin, she saw something she'd never seen before. A woman who looked almost beautiful. Not pretty by anyone's standards. Still too tall, too big, too much. But there was something in her face now that hadn't been there before. Something that looked like peace, like hope, like love. "Clara!" Rosie's voice came through the door. "Are you ready? Can I see?" Clara opened the door. Rosie's gasp was worth every hour of sewing.
You look like an angel, the child breathed. A real angel, like in my dream.
"I'm not an angel, sweetheart."
You are to me.
Rosie took her hand. "Come on, Papa's waiting. And he looks nervous. I've never seen Papa nervous before." The ceremony was held in the cabin. Sheriff Clayton had brought a preacher from town, a soft-spoken man who didn't ask questions about why they were getting married in a mountain cabin instead of a church. Old Miller stood as witness, along with his wife, a tiny woman with kind eyes who'd brought a pie for afterwards.
Elijah stood by the fireplace in his best shirt, his beard trimmed, his storm-gray eyes fixed on Clara as she walked toward him. He looked terrified. He looked hopeful. He looked like a man who couldn't quite believe his luck. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Elijah Cole Brennan and Clara Mae Jenkins."
Clara barely heard the words. She was too busy looking at Elijah, at the way his hands trembled slightly when he took hers, at the way his eyes never left her face, at the way he seemed to be memorizing this moment, storing it away somewhere safe. "Do you, Elijah, take Clara to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." No hesitation, no doubt. "And do you, Clara, take Elijah to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara thought about everything that had led to this moment. The auction block, the $200, Rosie's dreams and Elijah's stubborn kindness, and the slow, painful process of learning she might be worth something after all. "I do." The words came out strong, certain. Elijah slipped a ring onto her finger. Simple gold, his mother's ring, he'd told her, saved all these years for someone special. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Montana," the preacher said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Elijah cupped her face in his hands. "I love you," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "I should have said it before, but I love you, Clara. Everything you are, everything you've survived, everything you're going to become." Then he kissed her. It was gentle, reverent. The kiss of a man who'd lost everything once and was determined not to lose it again. When they broke apart, Rosie was crying. "Happy tears," she said, throwing her arms around both of them. "These are happy tears." "I'm so happy. We're a family now, a real family." Clara held her close. "We've been a family for a while now, sweetheart. This just makes it official." "Official is good," Rosie pulled back, grinning through her tears. "Official means forever." "Yes," Clara said, "it does." That night, after the pie was eaten and the guests had gone, and Rosie was asleep in the loft, Clara stood at the window of the cabin, looking out at the snow-covered mountains. Elijah came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything." Clara leaned back against him. "A month ago, I was standing on an auction block being sold like cattle. Now I'm married. I have a daughter. I have a home." "Does it feel real?" "Not entirely." She turned in his arms to face him. "I keep waiting to wake up. Keep waiting for someone to tell me it was all a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake." Elijah's voice was firm. "You're here because you're supposed to be here. Because a little girl dreamed about you, and I was smart enough to listen." "You didn't believe her dreams at first." "No." He smiled, that rare, beautiful smile that still made Clara's heart skip. "But I believe them now. I believe everything happens for a reason. I believe you were meant to find us, and we were meant to find you." Clara reached up to touch his face. "I love you," she said. "I should have said it before, too. But I love you, Elijah. I didn't think I'd ever love anyone. Didn't think I deserved to. But you made me believe I might be worth something. And that's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me." Elijah kissed her forehead. "You were always worth something, Clara. You just needed someone to help you see it." From the loft, Rosie's sleepy voice drifted down. "Are you done being mushy? Because I'm trying to sleep, and you're being very loud." Clara laughed. "Sorry, sweetheart. We'll be quiet." "Good, because tomorrow we have to make cinnamon rolls. You promised." "I did promise." "And Clara keeps her promises." Rosie's voice was fading. "That's one of the reasons I love her." Silence fell. Clara looked at Elijah. He looked at her.
"Come to bed," he said softly. "It's been a long day."
It's been a long life.
"Then let's start a new one." He took her hand. Together. Clara let him lead her away from the window. Behind them, the mountains stood guard in the moonlight. The snow glittered like diamonds, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, wild and free. But inside the cabin, everything was warm. The months that followed were harder than Clara expected. Healing wasn't a straight line. There were days when she woke up believing everything Silas had told her. Days when she looked in the mirror and saw nothing but the fat, worthless girl she'd been conditioned to see. Days when Elijah's love felt like a burden she didn't deserve. But there were also days when she caught herself laughing without thinking. Days when she looked at Rosie and felt such overwhelming love it took her breath away. Days when Elijah held her and she believed, truly believed, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Spring came slowly to the mountains. The snow melted, the streams thawed, and one morning, Clara woke to find wildflowers blooming in the meadow below the cabin.
Mama! Mama, come look!
Clara, still startled sometimes when Rosie called her that, still felt her heart catch with surprise and wonder. She went to the door, where Rosie was bouncing with excitement.
Look at the flowers! Can we pick some? Can we put them in the cabin, please?
Of course we can. They spent the morning gathering wildflowers, filling every container they could find with bursts of color. By afternoon, the cabin looked like something from a dream.
It's beautiful,
Rosie declared, surveying their work. It is.
Mama?
Yes, sweetheart? Rosie looked up at her with those two wise eyes.
Are you happy now? Really happy?
Clara knelt down to meet her gaze. Yes, I'm really happy.
Good,
Rosie nodded firmly.
Because I prayed for you, before the dream started. I prayed for someone to come and make Papa smile again, and be my mama. And then I dreamed about you, and now you're here.
Clara felt tears prick her eyes. You prayed for me? Every night, for a whole year. Rosie touched Clara's face. And God listened. He sent you to us. You're our miracle, Mama. Clara pulled the child close. No, sweetheart. You're mine. That evening, Elijah found them on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. Room for one more? Clara scooted over, and he settled beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Rosie climbed into his lap. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Rosie said,
Papa?
Yes, Bright?
Is Mama going to have a baby?
Clara froze. Elijah went very still. Why do you ask that?
Because I had another dream.
Rosie's voice was matter-of-fact.
There was a baby, a brother. He had your eyes, Papa. And Mama was holding him and crying happy tears.
Clara couldn't breathe. She'd been feeling strange lately, tired in ways she couldn't explain, sick in the mornings. She'd dismissed it as stress, as her body adjusting to her new life.
But what if it wasn't?
Rosie, Elijah said carefully, dreams don't always come true.
Mine do.
The child looked between them.
Is it true? Is there going to be a baby?
Clara met Elijah's eyes. I don't know, she said honestly. Maybe. Maybe means probably, Rosie grinned.
I'm going to be a big sister.
She scrambled off Elijah's lap and ran inside, already chattering about all the things she'd teach her baby brother. Clara and Elijah sat in silence. If it's true, Clara said finally, if I'm going to be a real mother, you're already a real mother, Elijah's voice was firm, to Rosie. Has been since the day you held her in the barn and let her show you the chickens.
You know what I mean.
I do, he took her hand. And if it's true, we'll face it together, just like everything else.
I'm scared.
I know.
Your wife died in childbirth. How can you not be terrified?"
Elijah was quiet for a long moment. "I am terrified," he admitted. "Every day, I'm terrified of losing you. But I've learned something in the last few months. Something important.
"What's that?"
Being afraid and being brave aren't opposites." He squeezed her hand. "Being brave means doing what needs to be done, even when you're scared. And I'd rather spend my life being scared with you than be safe and alone." Clara leaned into him.
"I love you."
"I love you too." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Whatever happens, we face it together. That's what family does." Family. Clara let the words settle into her bones. She had a family now. A husband who loved her. A daughter who dreamed her into existence. And maybe, just maybe, a new life growing inside her. She thought about the woman she'd been 8 months ago, standing on an auction block, worthless, hopeless, ready to give up. That woman was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone who'd survived the worst and found her way to the best. Someone who'd learned that being too much wasn't a flaw. It was a gift.
"Elijah,
Yeah?
thank you for seeing me when no one else could, for believing I was worth something when I couldn't believe it myself, for giving me a chance to become someone I never thought I could be."
Elijah turned her face toward his. "You were always that person, Clara. You just needed somewhere safe to bloom." He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. And when they finally pulled apart, the stars were coming out over the mountains, and Rosie was calling them inside for dinner, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled at the rising moon. Clara Mae Brennan stood up, took her husband's hand, and walked into her home. She'd been sold for $200 on an October afternoon. She'd been told she was worthless her entire life. She'd believed she would never be loved. But a 5-year-old girl had dreamed of angels, and a broken mountain man had chosen to believe. And in the end, that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.